Hey guys, in this video, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about World War II. World War II pops up a lot in several of the books that we're going to read, Lord of the Flies and also an Animal Farm. So I just wanted to give you a basic rundown. Now this is the very abridged version of World War II. When you take a history class, or if you've already taken one, you're going to learn more in depth. Also, some of the details, some of the words I'm going to use are not going to be entirely accurate. This is the Cavs abridged World War II. So, here we go. Once upon a time, there was this big event. It was called World War I, and it ended pretty badly for a lot of people. Most countries involved ended up having a depression of some kind afterwards. The United States, the United Kingdom, Russia, and also Germany. So Germany was the country that lost the most. And they were really trying. They'd had a monarchy, and then they had a democracy for a little while. Then there was this guy named Hitler, and he's like, I should be in charge. And everyone's like, yeah, we kind of like what you're saying. Because his big thing was, we had to pay for this entire war. Because basically the war ended, and all these countries were like, we need money. And we should all be paid for the damages. And you know who should pay? Germany. And Germany's like, there were like 8 of us. And everyone's like, Germany, pay up. And so Germany had to pay all these countries. And so Germany had no money, and things just were going really badly for Germany. So Hitler shows up, and he's like, not only do I think that we shouldn't have had to pay, and we should probably start taking a lot of stuff in a lot of other countries, like we should get Austria back. You know whose fault it is that everything's going badly? The Jews. And everyone's like, interesting. And tell us more. So Hitler decides he's going to start taking over. Just like I said, basic and abridged. Just go with me. Okay, so Hitler's starting to take over. He takes over Austria. He takes over Czechoslovakia. He's marching around, taking up bits of countries. And the other countries are like, hey, could you not? And the UK is like, that's just not okay. You're not supposed to do that. And Hitler's like, yes, I can. And they were like, but you're not supposed to. And it's like, what you going to do about it? And the UK is like, nothing at all. So the UK is not involved in they don't want to get involved in any conflicts. So France is like, no, seriously, he's taking over mainland Europe just because you're a little island. Like, we're going to get in trouble. We're going to get caught. We're going to get in trouble. And finally, this guy named Winston Churchill is in charge of England, and he's like, you're right, this is bad. We need to take action and stop Hitler from taking over Europe. They march into France. Germany controls France. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the United States is watching, and they're like, oh, we don't like this. But there's a lot of people in the U.S. who are like, we just got out of a war. We don't want to get involved. We would really like to just stay here, do our own thing. Okay? Now, there's another country that's kind of a big deal in this whole thing, and that's the country of Japan. And Japan has kind of been watching everything, and they're like, when Hitler started taking stuff over, Japan was taking stuff over. They were looking around, taking over bits of islands. They were taking over bits of China, and China's like, could you stop? And Japan's like, make us. And China's like, okay. So Japan's taking over everything. And they're kind of spreading out across the Pacific. Now, there's another country that has a lot of stuff in the Pacific, a lot of stuff going on, and that's the United States. That's us. And the United States is like, hey, Japan, you gotta stop. Like, this is not what we do. Like, we're not taking over these countries. We're just setting up bases and being their friends. And Japan's like, bring it on, U.S. And so the U.S. is like, okay, we have all this iron that you want, that you're using. We're gonna stop trading iron with you, Japan. And Japan's like, what? So Japan's ticked off at the U.S. right now. Okay, so there's that. Meanwhile, Russia is going through this major problem. Basically, we're going to save that for Animal Farm. Basically, the Russian royal family has been executed, and there's a new guy in power. His name is Stalin. Again, Animal Farm, right in there. So Stalin is like, I don't want to get involved in any of this. But there's no way that Hitler's going to be stupid enough to try to take over Russia or the Soviet Union now. And he's like, okay, so Hitler, we're going to shake on it. You don't invade me. I won't get involved. I won't help the UK. You can do your thing. Just leave us alone. And Hitler and Stalin shake on it. And they're not going to, so Russia's not involved. And the US is not going to be involved. And the UK is like, come on, US, help us out. Because now it's basically the UK and like French freedom fighters, and all the other little countries that are still not involved in the war that haven't been taken over, like Spain hasn't been taken over, Portugal, and then a lot of people from Scandinavia that are kind of like being sneaky because they've basically been taken over too. So everyone's kind of like, they got their little coalition. They're like, we need the US. We need the US to be involved. And the US is like, we can't, but we're going to send you supplies because you're our buddies and we love you. So the US is sending the UK supplies, and that's going really well. So then Germany and Japan are like, hey, how's this? You want this half of the world, we want this half of the world. Let's just buddy up and be friends. And then when we're done, we can fight it out and see who gets to be in charge. And they're like, great, awesome. So they shake on it. So we have Japan, we got Germany, they're buddy buddies. Okay? Now, there are two big things to know here. Germany really, really wants to take over Russia, but they promised. And Japan is really ticked at the US for not trading iron. But Germany and Japan have made a pact. Like, okay, you know what? You want to hit the US, we want to hit Russia. Let's make a deal. I won't attack Russia, you don't attack the US. Then the US will stay out of the war, because we know right now the US is just like, they're looking for an excuse. They're just looking for a reason to come in because they don't like either of us. And if the US comes into the war, they're going to come in on the side of the UK, and then we're going to be in trouble. And if Russia comes in, if we attack Russia, Russia will come in on the side of the UK, and then we're toast. Between the US and Russia and the UK, we're not going to make it. So we've got to keep the US and Russia out of this fight. Okay? Deal. Shake on it. And then Japan's like, yeah, but I really, really, really want to attack the United States. So December hits, and then we have the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Japan flies in, blows up a U.S. Navy base in Hawaii, and the U.S. is like, okay, let's go. So the U.S. enters the war on the side of the U.K., and Japan looks at Germany, and they're like, we're real sorry, we kind of dropped the ball. But they wouldn't share, and they kept like getting in our way and like stopping us from taking over places. We had to do something. So the U.S. is fighting in the Pacific and in Europe. And Germany's like, okay, well, that's okay. Like, this is not ideal, but Russia's not involved, so we're still good. Like, all we have to do is we cannot attack Russia. It's still winter. However, not too long after this, Hitler and his troops, well, not Hitler personally, but Hitler's troops, march up to Russia and invade. And Stalin's like, seriously? Why would you attack Russia in the middle of winter? Because the poor Germans are not prepared for this. They are cold, they die, Russia just decimates them. Russia gets decimated too, but there's a lot more Russians, and Stalin doesn't care, so he just like sends people after them. So now Russia's like, okay, UK, we don't like you. So they call up the UK on their little Europe phones. And they're like, hey, we know that we don't like you because we're communist and you're democracies, and you in the US, but we really hate Germany. So can we enter the war just this once and like be friends, and we can take them out, and we can go back to hating each other later? And the US and the UK say, welcome aboard Russia. And Japan like turns and looks at Germany like, excuse you. And Germany's like, yeah, we messed up. So basically between the US, the UK, and Russia, we have an advantage. We're able to win World War II. Great. Hitler commits suicide. Or is he currently hiding in Argentina? No, he committed suicide. But actually, a lot of high-ranking Nazis did, in fact, flee to Argentina, which is interesting. And at the same time, it wasn't all peaceful for Hitler either, because, fun fact, a lot of high-ranking German officials were trying to actively kill him. There were several plots. None of them were successful, but he was not exactly a popular guy. So that's all happening. So finally, we're having victory. Meanwhile, there's a lot of fighting going on in the South Pacific and also in Europe. So we have the D-Day invasion of Normandy, which is when they stormed the American and British troops stormed the beaches of France to liberate France from the Nazi forces. Woo, woo, woo. Okay, William Golding was there. And in that event, basically, they were just, the soldiers, the Nazis had the high ground, and our troops were coming in from the water and running up the hill. And it was a bloodbath. It was awful. So when we talk about William Golding not having much faith in the in humanity. Like, this is a man who saw his brothers in arms die all around him. Okay? And then, after that, he went to go and liberate a concentration camp. And again, not exactly the most positive, shining beacon of humanity. The other interesting thing about the concentration camps is that they weren't just making them work. They weren't just gassing them. There were a lot of experiments that were occurring in concentration camps and under Nazi rule, and also in Japan. For example, they did a lot of what is called twin studies. The idea would be that if you poke one twin, will the other twin feel it? If you flay one twin's arm, will the other twin feel it? How psychically linked are twins? Mm-hmm. Right? They also did experiments like, what is the melting point of human face? At what temperature will a human body freeze solid? They would do things like put you in fires or drop people in the Arctic Sea and kind of see what happened. Now, some of this data, particularly the freezing and melting part, has actually been very useful. It's one of those awful things that when they were going through the camps, they found all this information and they were like, oh, I'm so glad we have this. Now we can make good deep sea suits for the Coast Guard and for all the militaries and keep our people safe. And then someone was like, how did the Nazis get this data? Oh, no. So that all happened, right? So it's kind of a, because no one was going to do the research. So, like, it's data that it's a good thing we have it, but we'd rather not have it, if that makes sense. But yeah, so they did experiments like that. They did experiments like what would happen if you took the measles and the flu and combined them together. What would that look like? Just different tests on people. What would that look like? Different diseases, all sorts of horrible stuff. They were also working on a lot of space travel. A lot of the Nazi scientists actually would eventually move to the US and the UK and work in the space race because they weren't actually Nazi sympathizers. They were kind of trapped. There were a lot of scientists that were trapped, and there were a lot of scientists that were like, yeah, this is unethical, but all the funding for my research, which is not a good reason to do bad things. So that all was kind of happening at the same time. So William Golding was one of the people who found that research, and so that's the other reason that he did not believe that people were capable of goodness. So, but yeah, so basically there are two morals of the story. First of all, if you have one country to avoid ticking off, don't attack that country. Also, friends don't let friends attack Russia in the winter. Just don't do it. All right. Have a good day, guys. Bye.